Greetings, students from all over the country. My name is Ms. S. Mambondian. I'm the tutor for tourism and the environment for the degree course, and I'll be taking you through the subject, highlighting the main areas. First and foremost, since we are now nearing the end of the year, I have to give you some examination tips. Some examination tips on how you can succeed in your exams. First and foremost, definitely you have to study enough. You have to go through your notes, you have to go through your modules, you have to go through your, if you've got textbooks, you have to look for textbooks around. Don't just rely on the internet. You know, at times on the internet, the information is not so academic. So also go through textbooks which are written in environment, tourism and environment, sustainable tourism. And then when you're in the exam, I would urge you to read your questions well and try to get the keywords. Underline the keywords. You're free to underline. And then as you are writing, make sure that you are sticking to the keywords that you have been asked. For example, you can have a question like this. I'll demonstrate. Show how tourism and environment are related. This is a question. So the main keywords here are show how. You're showing how what? Tourism and environment are related. So these are your keywords, underline them in the exam. And then as you are writing, ask yourself, am I showing how? Am I showing how tourism and environment are related? Where are the similarities? Where are the differences? And give adequate points in the exam. Don't just write a paragraph and you expect to get high marks. No, you need to give adequate points. Put examples, put statistics, case studies from all over the world. And your answer should have an introduction, a body, and conclusion. That is very important. And I always urge students to come up with a plan. Make a plan, a quick plan in your exam. How am I going to tackle my question? You know, when you're in an exam, it's an attack. It's like a war. So what is your attack plan? So you need to indicate, I'll start by this and then go to the next point and this one and this one. And then you can cross out. So always be organized in your exam and prepare enough. The subject, these are the main topics. I'm not giving you, this is not a scope for the exam, but these are the major items in our subject. You need to understand tourism and its relationship to environment. You also need to look in greater detail to tourism impacts on the environment. Then you also need to look on sustainable tourism issues. You also need to look on the strategies to reduce impacts. And then, most importantly, the role of the public sector, which is the government in sustainable tourism and host and guest relations. So I'll go into the content of the subject. I'm sure you're familiar with the definition of tourism from first year, where we have, these are activities, tourism is activities that are undertaken by people when they are away from home, from their usual environment. And environment refers to, we have got two types of environments. We have got the natural, we have got the artificial. So generally, in simple terms, environment refers to our surrounding. So this surrounding can be natural, which is the landscape, the climate, the people around you, the vegetation. And we also have built-in environment, which is now built by humans. We have got infrastructure such as buildings, roads, sewage, and so forth. Then we also have tourism superstructure, which is the hotels, the restaurants, the conference centers, the car rentals. Those make up the environment. So take note, we have environment in two parts, the natural, which is natural, created by God, and then we have the built-in environment. What is the relationship now between tourism and environment? Tourism does not operate in isolation. It operates in an environment. So whether the environment is natural or artificial, it is the most fundamental ingredient of a tourism product. You cannot have tourism without the environment. Even if it is happening in space tourism, that's the environment, right? So as soon as tourism starts taking place in the environment definitely is going to be altered, is going to be modified, is going to be changed And this is the whole essence of this subject. How is the environment going to be changed? It can be changed in a positive manner, it can be changed in a negative manner. But as a country, as a government, you would want the environment to be left as it is, or to have minimal impacts resulting from tourism. What are these impacts that tourism brings into the environment? As we are aware, tourism involves people moving from their homes to the unusual environment, and usually they come in large numbers. So when they come in, they tremble on the environment, on the soil, on the vegetation, on the natural environment, on the built-in environment. So you can have changes in flora and fauna species composition. When we say flora, we mean vegetation. When we say fauna, we mean animals. So we have disruption of the ecosystem, the breeding systems, the plants, those young ones which are growing. People can tramp in with their feet, with their vehicles. Small animals, they can be tramped in. Animals are killed. I think you've heard about trophy hunting. Animals are killed, and this definitely affects the ecosystem. So we have changes in the vegetation, changes in the fauna. We also have pollution as a major impact of tourism on the environment. Pollution, water pollution, discharge of sewage. When you've got people coming to the hotels, definitely sewage will increase. We also have spillage of oil and petrol, especially when it comes to boats in the sea. Cruise ships, they are creating a lot of water pollution in the seas. Air pollution from vehicle emissions. You know, when the car is burning the fuel, we have got emission coming up. Air transport has become the worst in air emissions. These huge aircrafts that are flying by, that you see, they are causing a lot of air pollution. We also have noise pollution. I'm sure all of you can be affected by this. When the tourists come, they go to nightclubs, a lot of noises result from that. Quad bikes, I'm sure those who are from Morfish Bay, they can testify this. When we have got those quad bikes climbing the sandy dunes, they make a lot of noise. The airports, they also make a lot of noise. It's very fortunate that in Windhoek, Osia Kutako is about 45 kilometers from the city. But some cities, have got their airports within them, and a lot of noise results, and it affects the local population, such that some people, they even have ear problems resulting from that. Erosion. We have soil erosion because of the vehicles, and this can cause a lot of problems, especially when it comes to the soil fertility. Sandy dunes are damaged. We have got the popular sand dune in Swakopmund, June 7. We have seen a lot of decrease even in its height. We also have depletion of ground and surface water supplies. We also have changes to the visual. We have got hotels that have been built, car parks to cater for the tourists. These, they affect the natural ness of the surroundings. We also have litter, which is thrown by empty bottles and so forth. There are so many impacts that comes in. We have infrastructure which are now being built to cater for the tourists, and this, they actually change the nature of the environment. For example, in Swakopmund, we have got the Swakopmund Resort. We now have a new hotel, Strand Hotel. It has definitely changed the outlook of the beach. So we have major impacts on the environment resulting from tourism. Changes in the urban form. We have some houses that have been turned into hotels and bed and breakfast. In Windhoek, if you go to Osia Kutako Road, they've been now we don't have residential houses along the road. We have more of hotel establishments where tourists can come and stay. However, these are mainly the negative impacts, but we also have positive impacts resulting from tourism, where we have preservation and restoration of ancient monuments, especially those which are cultural. We have the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Egypt. They try to preserve them, and this also contributes positively to the environment. Creation of national parks where animals are kept. If it was not like that, most wildlife could have been killed by the local communities for the meat and for other uses. And also we have maintenance of forests in the protected areas. However, This subject also looks at environmental impact assessment. It's very, very important. What is environmental impact assessment? It is the process that enables researchers to predict the environmental consequences associated with any proposed development project. So before you develop your tourism, you should have an EIA, an environmental impact assessment, to see to foresee what kind of impacts are going to result from the development of tourism. To open that area to tourism, what impacts are going to result? If the impacts are major, it's better to stop the project. But if they are minimal, you can always go ahead and put some strategies here and there. These are the process of EIA. You first audit it, what are the resources which are in there. You also look at the environmental problems that may be affected by the project. And then you look at the possible detrimental effects to people, to the flora, to the fauna, to the soil and water and the air, the peace and quietness of the area. If the impacts are huge, then it is advisable not to go ahead with your tourism project. But if they are minimal, then you can bring in your tourism, but with extra caution. Then, as we have seen, there are likely to be impacts, negative impacts on the environment. There is now a greater need for all tourism destinations to practice what is called sustainable tourism. This is a major aspect in your subject of tourism and environment. Sustainable tourism is when you satisfy the needs of the tourism or tourists at the present moment, but at the same time thinking about the future. So it means you need to look at tourism, you need to satisfy the tourists who are coming, but at the same time you don't have to destroy the environment. You have to keep it, you have to keep the attractions, the monuments, the cultures, so that the future generation can also benefit. The future generation of the local community, the future generation of the tourists, they should also benefit. And one major type of tourism which is very sustainable is called ecotourism. And this is responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment and sustains the well-being of local people. So it is a type of tourism which is very sustainable. It promotes fewer tourists to come into areas which are unspoiled, and they should interact with the host community, and the local community should benefit more from the tourism. So what is the difference between sustainable tourism and ecotourism? Ecotourism is a subset of sustainable tourism. It's a type of tourism. But sustainable tourism is supposed to be a lifestyle. It's a concept which should be applied to all tourism. All tourism should be sustainable. Whether it's urban tourism, it's beach tourism, it's mountain tourism, it should be practiced in a way where you're benefiting the present tourist, but at the same time, you also benefit the future tourist. So, in essence, ecotourism is perceived to be a sub-component of sustainable tourism, and all countries are trying by any means to develop this concept of ecotourism. All destinations should be sustainable. We should all practice sustainable tourism. And these are the principles which should be followed. Number one, taking a holistic view where you are looking at all other activities. Don't just look at tourism. Also include agriculture, also look at mining. And you need to include everybody, multi-stakeholder engagement. All the host community, the government, the private sector should be involved. You have to plan in a long term. Don't just look at the short-term benefits, but it should be a long-term plan. And also, sustainable tourism should include both global and local impacts. Don't just look at the local impacts of Namibia, but also look at global impacts, things like climate change. They are not local, they are global, right? And then you also have another principle of promoting sustainable consumption, not just from the supply side, but also from the demand side. You also need to look at the tourists that are visiting you. Are they practicing sustainable ways in your area? Then try to equate sustainability and quality of the service to the tourist. And then another important factor is the polluter pay principle, where tourists should pay for the damages that they are creating in a destination. They can pay it through the taxi, they can pay it through the fees. They should somehow pay for the impacts that they are also causing in the destination. And you need to minimize risks for when you're developing sustainable tourism. Then take a life cycle perspective. This means you need to look at the impacts over the whole life cycle of a product. Don't just look in small parts. Look at the whole life cycle of the product. And we have considering of functional activities. You have respecting limits, whereby you need to limit the amount of tourism development. Don't just grow it for the sake of gaining more benefits, but you need to limit it. And as you limit your tourism development, you also limit the impacts that are likely to be caused. And sustainable tourism, one of the principles is adapting to changing conditions. Like now we have global threats such as climate change, terrorism. You need to consider them when you are planning your tourism and take a risk management approach so that you reduce the risks. And we need also to look at the role of private sector when you're looking at sustainable tourism. When you're looking at the tourism and environment, the government plays an important role. If you look at private sector, they are mainly up for profits. But at the end of the day, the government is responsible for all the resources. So the government should be on the lead, especially on sustainable tourism development. And the government comes in various ways. The land use planning, they can actually demarcate the area. This is for tourism, this is for agriculture, this is for mining. Tourism should not take up all the land which was meant for other economic activities. So the government is the one which demarcates the land use zones so that other activities, other sectors of the economy are also left operating. Then the labor and environmental regulations, they have come from the government. The provision of infrastructure, such as roads, airports, it's a government responsibility. Marketing, like here in Namibia, we have the Namibia Tourism Board, is responsible for the marketing of the tourism of Namibia. Information services, where we have information being sent to various countries about what we are offering, it remains a government responsibility. And also education. And right now, we don't want to have the government doing it 100%. So there's now the issue of PPPs, public-private partnership, where the government should work with the private sector. They should have joint ventures in promoting tourism. We have spoken about the various environmental impacts, but how should we manage them? There are so many ways. Controlling the number of visitors, like those issues of permits, visitors, there are some of the ways of controlling visitors who are coming to an area. Modifying visitor behavior. There's some things that you should just stop the tourists from doing. Giving them general information. You should also try to bring visitors in out of season, where those times when tourists are fewer, try to give discounts so that you have got a general spread of tourists throughout the year, so that they don't come in influx in one season, but try to spread the load. And also use of signs, use of tourist information centers. Tell them about the do's and don'ts in your area, so that the code of conduct, so that they don't damage the environment. Restrict the use of sites for regrowth. It's allowed to close some of the areas, the tourist attraction, so that they grow, so that you redevelop them, so that you give time for the nature to grow itself. Limits to vehicles and boats should be enforced. Entrance fees should be enforced to both locals and internationals. The use of wardens, guides, or guards to watch over unruly behaviors, theft or deliberate damage. These things should be put in place so that you protect your environment. At the end of the day, a country like Namibia is responsible for its environment. It's responsible for its tourism development. So you should put in the rules and regulations so that these impacts are reduced. Then there's an important aspect that you need to look at, the host-guest relationship. When tourists come, they meet the host nation, the host communities. There are likely to be conversations, some interactions, and they change with the time. So Iridex is a theory which tries to explain this kind of relationship. Like when they come in the first stage, he talks about euphoria, where people are excited. They want the tourists because it's bringing employment. They are getting some income from it. The host community, they really love the tourists. The tourists are enjoying. When they go back, the tourists, they even invite their friends and family. And then the numbers increase. We go to the apathy now, where the host community is getting used to tourists. They are setting up the shops, the craft stores. They make money from the tourists. They are now getting familiar to the tourists. They are benefiting. But as the numbers of tourists keep on growing, the host population can become irritated. Why? Because the tourists can take up their space. They can take up places in their restaurants. They can fill up the shops. So the hosts they start becoming irritated. And we have had some cases where destinations, like there's a Pemba destination in Mozambique, there were now more tourists than the local people. And the prices of goods, they actually rose. So the locals didn't like it. And now they start getting irritated. And then this leads to the last stage of antagonism, where they can even fight. We can have issues of xenophobia, racialism. They can come in. The local communities, they are even ripping off the tourists. They are robbing them. Crime rises and so forth. So this theory tries to explain some of the impacts that can result from the interaction of the host and the tourists. It's not always a good story. When they're starting to come, it's a good story, but with time, as the numbers increase, they can actually create problems with the locals. So some of the effects will result in changes in behaviors. We also have the coping of behavior, the good things and the bad things, the cultures. We lose the host community can lose some of their cultural values because of the interaction with the tourists. The tourists can also copy from the host community. We have cultural shock. So all this theory explains mainly the impacts that happens when the tourists come to the host nation. These are the impacts that happens on the environment. We also have staged authenticity, where the local communities, they start performing certain, let's say it's a dance. They start changing it to try and make the tourist happy. So they leave their original sense of culture, and they try to adopt to please the tourists. So it's called staged authenticity. So in short, tourism and environment is interrelated. Tourism cannot operate outside the environment. Tourism is environmentally centered, whether it's natural and also artificial. So the tourists are coming to see the attractions, which are mainly natural. We have got landscapes, we have got the beach, the sea. They come in, they want to view, they want to climb the mountains. They also want to see the built-in environment. Like now we have got beautiful malls, we have got Eiffel Tower in France. But when they interact now, the tourist and the environment, we are likely to have impacts that result from that. And these impacts could either be positive or negative. But what we are saying now, we need to practice sustainable tourism so that as the present tourists are benefiting, we also want to keep the environment for the future generation. And that aspect is called sustainable tourism. Let us not, as a nation, just get the short-term benefits in terms of incomes, in terms of employment. We are satisfied, we are happy, our pockets are full, but then we are destroying the environment. So sustainable tourism is those practices of tourism which satisfy the present tourists and also make way for the future generation. So you cannot separate tourism and environment. Tourism does not operate in isolation. It operates in the environment. Even if it's space tourism, it's still an environment. So the government should play an important role in bringing, in achieving this sustainable tourism. All tourism, all different types of tourism, be it beach tourism, mountain tourism, rural tourism, it should be sustainable so that as we satisfy today, the tomorrow demand is also satisfied. That's why we now have arguments between environmentalists versus economists. Some environmentalists, they're actually saying tourism is bad. It's affecting the environment. It's destroying the environment, the ecosystems. But the economists are saying tourism is very good. It's a very good way of economic activity. We want countries to develop tourism so that you get more income generation from that, employment, and so many other standard of living of local people is improved. So there is always a war between environmentalists and economists. But as a country, you cannot shut down to tourism. It's a good economic activity, but it should be practiced well. You need to have strategies being put in place so that as the tourists are coming in, you balance both the environmental benefits as well as the economic benefits. You would want your environment to be preserved, you would want to protect it, but at the same time you also create employment. Like now in Africa, we have got issues where we have high unemployment. So tourism is creating quite a lot of employment opportunities. Many young people are employed in the tourism. So you would want to balance both the environment as well as the economy. And let us not look at the tourism and environment at a local level. We need to look at the global level. But because when you look at some of the effects, especially climate change, it does not affect local areas. It affects the whole world. It affects the world in a very big way. So we need to also interact with other countries, like in Southern African region. That's why we have got organizations such as Retosa, which is an organization for Southern Africa, regional tourism organization for Southern Africa. It includes all countries in Southern Africa, where they sit and try to talk about these issues of tourism and environment and balance the two, so that we don't have regional impacts, we don't have impacts that are so huge. So in short, tourism and environment are one and the same thing. You cannot have tourism on its own. It's all together. We benefit a lot from tourism. Tourism has got impacts on the environment, but we should try and balance it. So if you have got any questions, you are free to contact me on my email, and then we can discuss. But this is real. Let us look around. Let us look at what is happening around us, and you can suggest ways. We would want you to go and work for the ministry and help them, because we don't want to destroy our environment today and then tomorrow we have nothing. We would want to balance the tourism of today and the tourism of tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I wish you well in your studies and also in your examination.